All right, everyone. Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. I'm joined, as always, by Daniel Starkin. And we had a rough start to the season as far as these live shows. Lots of losses and ugly ones. The Dodgers made up for it today. We get 2 wins in a doubleheader, a pair of 7-inning games. We appreciate you joining us, as always. We're on Periscope. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook Live. If you're in any of those places, please, we've got comments. Leave us questions. The biggest thing we always ask for, we'd love to hear, what are your takeaways from both the games today? Your biggest observations, positive or negative. And so, Daniel, the Dodgers get 2 wins. They outscored the Giants 9-0, 14 innings of shutout baseball. Your biggest observations right off the top.
I mean, it has to start with the pitching staff, right? I mean, the Giants didn't score a run in either game. I know this is not, the world's best offense or anything like that the Dodgers were facing, but the Giants have had some solid hitters this season. Mike Yastrzemski's having a good year. Donovan Solano's having a good year. Brandon Belt is red hot, as we saw the other night. So for the Dodgers pitching staff, which, by the way, Walker Buehler was supposed to start one of the games, so he ended up, being scratched and went on the DL. So it was a complete bullpen game in Game 2. So for them to shut out the Giants for 14 innings, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and guys like Walker Buehler's a storyline we'll definitely get to a bit later in the show. Gavin Lux, another storyline we'll get to as well. There's lots to talk about, but for me, as I look at these 2 games, there's actually one guy who jumps out at me that we've actually talked a bit about and not necessarily positively, and that was Jock Peterson. He was the best player for the Dodgers today. He finishes 3 for 3 on the day. He had a double and a home run in the second game. He had a run and an RBI in the first game as well. So it was a big day for him. And honestly, I was encouraged even to see him out there. In the first game, he fouls the ball off, or he took a hit by pitch off of his knee that he probably could have got called for a strike on, but he takes it off the knee, and then he actually came out of the game. So that was a bit worrisome for me, but good to see him come back. I mean, he absolutely roped 2 pitches in the second game. I think both of them were 109 miles an hour on the home run. It was 435 feet to dead center. And then he had a double even harder. It was like 109.3 miles an hour. Scores on a Will Smith double. Dodgers win 2-0. So I think for me, Jock Peterson's the big surprise. And maybe that's a better word for it. It's a positive story because he was a surprise. Jock Peterson's a guy the Dodgers have been trying to get going. It finally seemed like he's starting to click.
Yeah. I think, on our last show, we talked at length about how we were both a little disappointed in Jock and his start to the season. But we also talked about how he's a streaky hitter and he could get going at any time. So it was a good day for him. That home run was an absolute missile. It was like a line drive, 434 to dead center or whatever it was. So he put some good swings on some balls today, and hopefully, he could build off of that moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, how quickly things can change. Just after that performance today, his batting average is up to 218, which isn't great, but on-base percentage at 330, that's basically career average. Slugging percentage 449, so it's not where you want to see it, but I mean, 779 that doesn't make the conversation a big disappointment. So one big day for Jock Peterson, couple extra base hits, get all those numbers going in the right direction. So we'll get to the bullpen in a minute. I think the other big storyline from today is Clayton Kershaw. As far as on the field, 6 innings, 4 hits, no walks, 4 strikeouts, lowers his season ERA to 1.80. A little nervy in the first inning. He gives up a single, and then Bellinger makes just an absolutely unbelievable play. I mean, it goes down as an out, but the guy ran, I think they said, over 100 feet at 30 miles an hour. He flips his glove upside down to make that catch in the deepest part of the ballpark. Absolutely unbelievable play to save a run, for sure save a run. And then the very next batter, A.J. Pollock makes a sliding catch in left field. So he gets a little fortunate in the first. He kind of settles down from there, and he looked really good today.
Yeah, well, let me start with that outfield defense real quick, because we're watching the best defensive outfield in baseball every night with the Dodgers. You got 3 Gold Glovers out there in Mookie, Cody, and Pollock, and they really helped Kershaw out today. And he even mentioned it in his post-game press conference as well. He didn't have his best stuff today. He got through 6, and honestly, I was a little surprised they didn't send him back out there for the 7th, but they did have a rested bullpen with what ended up being a day off yesterday.
Yeah.
So they let Josh Spores get in there and close it out in a 7-0 game. But even without his best stuff, he didn't give up any damage. He only gave up 4 hits. His command was good. He didn't walk anyone, struck out 4. So that's a good outing for him. His ERA is down to 1.80. I remember after his last start against the Giants when everyone was ready to push the panic button. But since then, he's turned in 3 really good outings in a row, and he's looking, healthy and like himself, which I think is huge for the Dodgers, especially considering how many other question marks there are in the rotation right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's really literally the only guy. He's had one rough start, and rough goes in quotations because, again, his ERA on the season is 1.80. And it's classic Kershaw, right, where he says, I didn't have my best up, and he still goes 6 shutout, gets no walks, only 4 hits. Now, there was some hard contact. Both those balls in the first inning were like over 100 miles an hour. I think the one Bellinger caught, the expected batting average on that ball is about 820. So it shows you just a tad about how good of a catch it is. I haven't seen the catch probability, but I would imagine it's low. But that was a great one for him. And so it was a big day for Kershaw. And, yeah, as you said, the Dodgers didn't announce a starting pitcher for the second game until right up before it, which we can get to that storyline in a second because there's a whole lot of fun there. But I think, Lola mentions on YouTube, Kershaw gave the Dodgers much needed length. And I think that's right. I think that allowed them to make some of the decisions they did in the second game, knowing that they could preserve some of their better arms because not only Kershaw went 6, but the Dodgers were up 7-0. So they could put a guy like Spores in who looked fine, but who probably wasn't going to see game action in a high leverage situation. So I do think that was a plus. And we'll get to the guys who performed in the second game, but I think the length allowed them to do some things in the second game that were probably helpful. And I'll throw. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo that length was huge because with Buehler going down, they called up Mitch White, he's never pitched in the big leagues before, and we weren't sure if he was going to start the second game, maybe come in relief and pitch a few innings if they needed length, but with what Kershaw gave them in the first game and having a full rested pen, they didn't even need to use Mitch White in the second game.
Yeah. And I'll mention one other thing from the first game before we move on, but a big milestone for Mookie Betts. He gets his 1,000th hit in that game, which, I mean, Mookie Betts has been one of the best players in baseball ever since he comes up. And every time somebody hits a milestone like that, it just reminds me how insane it is to get 3,000 hits. Mookie Betts has 1,000 hits. He's been playing for about 5 full seasons, plus a couple partials his rookie year and now. And to think that at his age, 26, I believe, right, he's got to play 10 more seasons at 200 hits per season just to get to 3,000. Oh, by the way, he's had one 200-hit season in his career. So, I mean, impressive to get to 1,000 as young as he did. Obviously, it's just confirmation of how great he is. But to me, it's these little things where it's like, oh, my gosh, that's insane. And one friend reminded me, he said, and then remember Ichiro, who got 3,000 hits in America, over 3,000 hits in America, plus another like 1,200 or 1,500 abroad. So Ichiro's on his own planet there.
Yeah, Ichiro's insane. But yeah, that was really cool to see Mookie reach that milestone in a Dodger uniform. I'm sure we're going to see him reach a lot of milestones in this uniform over the next decade. But, I mean, what a player.
Yeah.
And this week's been, a heavy week for him as well, obviously, with everything going on. So for him to go out and play today, he originally wasn't in the lineup and then decided he wanted to play. It was good to see him out there and good to see the Dodgers get 2 wins.
Yeah, and that leads to the second game. We've got a couple people in the comments, Mitch and Gerson, talking about the bullpen, and we'll get to that in a second. I think one funny storyline that came out, Andrew Baggerly, who reports on the Giants, he tweeted that the Dodgers waited until 26 minutes before first pitch to name a starter. So the Giants, in response, moved the first pitch back from 4:05 to 4:40. He jokes the rivalry now includes brushbacks and purpose pitches between front offices, to each their own. It's funny, sort of, because it's Farhan and it's Gabe Kapler, and this feels like it's probably more Gabe Kapler than it is Farhan. But these guys are Dodger guys that have switched, not to mention Kapler's the guy that the whole first series was waiting until the very last second to name a starting pitcher. So it just seems like Bush League, Little League type stuff. I mean, for the Dodgers not to have their lineup out in the second game of a doubleheader, I mean, I understand how that's annoying, but I don't know what the rules are. It just seems childish to me.
Yeah. It would definitely seemed unnecessary, a bit of pettiness.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know for sure if that's the real reason why they pushed the game back, but if that is, that just seems kind of unnecessary. I was excited for the second game to get started right away. and then I ended up just kind of sitting there
Yeah,
waiting for a half an hour. I think Sportsnet LA put on an old episode of Backstage Dodgers, so I watched that for like the third or fourth time or
there you
whatever,
go.
just waiting for the game to
Yeah.
start.
Well, the Dodgers did eventually get started in the second game. Caleb Ferguson pitched the first inning for the Dodgers, and I think that leads to the most impressive thing, my favorite part of the second game, and that's Victor Gonzalez. We're talking about the bullpen. A couple people are commenting on the Dodgers bullpen here. I mean, Victor Gonzalez to me embodies just how good the Dodgers are. This is a guy that before the season nobody had ever heard of. This is a guy that even today, if you ask Dodger fans to name the guys in the bullpen, maybe he gets named, and if he does, he's probably eighth or ninth on that list. Victor Gonzalez throws 2 1/3 scoreless innings today. He lowers his season ERA to 1.22 in just over 7 innings. He's got 7 strikeouts, only allowed 1 walk and 4 hits. An unbelievable story. I mean, I was looking at his Fangraphs page and all the years from 2013 to 2016. This is a guy that never got above A ball. Misses all of 2017 with Tommy John surgery. 2018 and 2019 starts off in A and high A. Last year in 2019, he goes to high A to double A to triple A. And this year he makes his major league debut. Now, having said all of that, I'm thinking to myself, how old is this guy? Well, he was signed with Julio Urias as a 16-year-old. So he's only 24 years old. He's been in the Dodger organization since 2013. He's 24 years old. They were both signed months apart from Mexico. It's a crazy, unbelievable story. Something clicked for him last year, and now he's in the big leagues. He's got a 1.22 ERA. He gets the Dodgers 7 outs, doesn't allow a base runner. Really impressive stuff from him today.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really know too much about Victor Gonzalez coming into the season, but the way he's pitched, he's looking like he could be, a fixture in this bullpen for, many years to come. Obviously, he's young, like you just said. But I'm just going to read our guy, future Dodgers, Justin Lorber's tweet, because he tweeted out some of his stats. And he came in tonight with a 50% whiff rate on his slider, which is pretty impressive. And he got 5 more swings and misses on the slider today when he threw 8 of them. So that number's only going up. In his last 3 outings, he's up to 6 1/3 scoreless while only allowing 1 hit. So this is a guy who was on nobody's radar coming into the season. Yeah. We knew the bullpen was going to be improved just based on the other guys they had, but just to add another guy like this who could end up being a permanent fixture is just credit to this front office and the player development staff. They did a really good job with Victor Gonzalez once again.
Yeah, and so he gets the Dodgers through his part. We get Brusdar Graterol in for an inning. Things did get a little shaky. Scott Alexander forgot how to throw strikes for a moment there. Blake Trinan has to come in and bail him out. Then we have Kenley Jansen come in for the ninth. Then we got our typical Kenley Jansen experience. Nothing's ever easy with him. Brandon Belt gets a bunt single. Jansen ends up striking out to end the game. So overall, an impressive performance for Dodgers. I mean, it looked at one point like they were going to have a potential no-hitter that wouldn't have counted. They end up giving up 2 hits, 3 walks in the end of the day. So toward the end, it gets a little rough. Alexander with 2 walks. Jansen gives up a hit and a walk. Does strike out, get strikeouts for all 3 of his outs. So kind of a classic Kenley Jansen performance. And the Dodgers just scrape one out. I mean, Jock gets a home run. Then he gets a double. Will Smith gets a double. And all of a sudden, they only get 3 hits on the day, but they end up with 2 runs. Dodgers win. One question I'm curious about. What's your take on this format? 7 innings, doubleheader. What was your take on that?
I kind of like it for the regular season and especially considering, these games didn't, mean a whole lot to the Dodgers because their record's already so great. But I thought, they were both games moved pretty quickly. They were able to get both of them in, and both games were, I think, like 2 hours each or 2.5 hours each.
Yeah.
So I thought it was kind of nice, to be honest. I got to watch a lot of baseball, 14 total innings, but it didn't feel like a full-on doubleheader where I feel like in a normal doubleheader where both games are 9 innings each, by the middle of that second game, things start kind of dragging.
Yeah. There was something about it that didn't feel as weird as maybe as I was expecting it to. I mean, it's definitely bizarre when to think about how it impacts a bullpen. Like in the first game is the classic example where Kershaw goes 6, probably could have gone 7, and you would have had no bullpen action whatsoever. It also leads to the second game where you just throw a bullpen game out there and you throw a bunch of different arms. So it was interesting, but I was shocked at how normal 7 innings felt to me. And so, I mean, doubleheaders, usually you don't get to watch both ends of a doubleheader. Normally there aren't a ton of doubleheaders. I mean, I don't remember the last one the Dodgers had, but this was a good one. Obviously, winning 9-0, that helps. I mean, imagine being a Giant fan and watching doubleheaders from 1:10 to 7:10, 6 hours of baseball. Your team never scores. In the second game, they had, 2 hits. The first game, 4 hits. So, I mean, it would have been rough. We're not feeling bad for the Giants fans out there, though, as well. So that's what we've got. As I'm saying, if you're watching in the comments, please let us know what's your biggest takeaway from today's action. Is it Jock Peterson? Is it Clayton Kershaw? Is it Victor Gonzalez? Is it the bullpen? Tell us what you're thinking. There's 2 other big storylines that I want to talk about, though. And the first one we'll start with is the big Dodger news that broke this morning. Walker Buehler placed on the injured list with a blister. I wake up to a bunch of text messages saying the Dodgers have a new Rich Hill. Walker Buehler's got blister problems. We're hoping that it's not Rich Hill level bad. We're hoping that we don't get stories of how to fix blisters like we got from Rich Hill. But level of concern for you with Walker Buehler going on the injured list is what?
It's hard to say. Blisters could be, a 1-week thing and then never again, or it could be something that, kind of lingers for months to come, especially if you try to continue throwing. So I think Dave Roberts said the plan is for him to get activated and make his next start 5 days down the line. So I'm not too concerned right now. But let's say he either A, gets scratched from that start, or B, makes that start and ends up having to leave because the blister flares up. That's when I think the level of concern would start to grow a little more.
Yeah. I mean, it did sound like this was very precautionary. The Dodgers have a record that they do, and so they can kind of take precautions in a situation like this. But it's concerning to me just because of who it is. Walker Buehler is obviously fantastic, has nothing to do with that. But this is a guy that got to season late, and we saw what that did to him. He took him a while to build up. He hasn't looked like himself. He finally makes one start where he's absolutely dominant and then immediately back on the injured list. So it's slightly concerning to me of, okay, let's say, I'm assuming he hasn't thrown in at least a couple of days. Maybe he has been throwing. Maybe that's part of the problem. But if he takes 3 or 4 days off of throwing, I just wonder if that's going to mess up the routine and a rhythm for a guy that finally felt like he was doing it. And again, it's not like there's tons of time to build up. If he comes back for his next start 5 days from now, well, the Dodgers are down to 4 weeks until the playoffs start. So, 4 weeks at most, he's getting 4 or 5 starts. So there's a small level of concern to me. If he makes his next start, if he looks good, then all concern out the window. But that will be something to watch. And the Dodgers, are a little bit shorthanded from a starting pitching. We keep talking about how much depth they have. Well, Alex Wood is still out. Walker Buehler's now out. Tony Gonsolin would have been activated today had they not had him throw 99 pitches in a simulated game on Monday. So obviously they couldn't have known this was going to happen. They needed to keep him on some sort of a throwing schedule. So that's just bad luck. But the good news for Tony Gonsolin, I guess, is that he'll probably get another start, I would imagine. I haven't been tracking whether or not, or is Mitch White, who takes, or do they just keep the rotation going after the doubleheader? Have you seen anything about how the rotation looks from here between now and when Buehler may or may not come back?
They haven't said anything major yet. I know Robert said the plan is for Buehler to start in 5 days, so he wouldn't, miss any time because they could retroactive the IL date to when he last pitched, so it'll be 10 days by the next time. And the team also has an off day Monday, so in theory they technically could have a 4-man rotation for now. But I also think if there's any issue with Buehler, then they wouldn't hesitate at all to call up Gonsolin to make that start. I doubt they'll have him throw another simulated game this week. But yeah, no, I get where you're coming from with a little bit of concern for Buehler, especially. You're right. He looked great in his last start. For basically the first time this season, he struck out 12 against the Rockies. So I also was looking forward to seeing him pitch today to see, how he could build off that, to see, if he's officially back or if we're still, kind of waiting to see. But as long as the blister issue doesn't, reoccur and he could get over it this week and then be good to go, I still think there's plenty of time. But also, with the trade deadline coming up on Monday, that's maybe something for the team to consider. We already talked about on the last show that they could be in the market for a starting pitcher, and now with a little bit of uncertainty surrounding Buehler, maybe they make sure they go out and get another starter.
Yeah, and that was a question that Peyton Spear dropped in the comments below, so we appreciate the questions, and it looks like we might be having technical difficulties with the stream, so hopefully it's not too bad. But his question was the thoughts on the Lance Lynn rumor. I mean, I'm not sure a blister that's like a 5 or 10 days trip to the IL necessarily changes anything, but we've kind of talked about if they are going to make a move, it does feel like if you can, the only move that's possible to help this team would be if you could get a guy that's a surefire 1 through 4 starter in the postseason. Lance Lynn under contract for 1 more year next year. This is a guy that, what's his stat? 60. How many straight starts has he got with 100+ pitches? So he's durable. He throws a lot of pitches. He throws a lot of innings, and he's been really good. He had, I was looking at his career numbers today. I think he had like 1 rough season basically, and every other year his FIP is below 4. His ERA is pretty good. So the cost might be somewhat because he is under contract for another year, but what do you think about the Lance Lynn rumors?
I think I'm higher on Lance Lynn than most. I think he would be a good addition. He's been really solid with the Rangers the last couple of years, and he's been borderline lights out this year, and he's in the Cy Young conversation. So I think that's a guy who has postseason experience. He's a veteran guy, so I think he would be a solid addition when you're talking about a postseason rotation. Outside of Buehler and Kershaw, the Dodgers have a lot of inexperience in their rotation. So adding that third experienced starter could be a good move to make. I wouldn't overpay too much. I'm not giving up any of our top guys, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But he does have 1 year left after this year, so that's something to consider. He'd be around next year. And I don't know, how many other top line starting pitchers are going to be available. So he might be one of only a few options. I'm not sure what Cleveland's going to do with Mike Clevenger. Maybe if Cincinnati loses a couple more games, Trevor Bauer could be available. But other than that, we're not looking at too many top line guys who, frankly, would even make the Dodgers' 4-man rotation in the postseason.
Yeah, and I mean, Clevenger is the other name that has come up at times. Obviously, he got recalled by the Indians, so that feels less and less likely that they probably hold on to him. And I know Jim Bowden has absolutely insane proposal of Clevenger and Lindor coming to the Dodgers. It was just like, what are we talking about here? But I think the cost on Clevenger would be too high. And even, and some people have mentioned that even with a guy like Lance Lynn, they could acquire him and potentially flip him at the end of the season. Like if you get to say, hey, next year we got David Price coming back, we've still got Gonsolin, May, Buehler, Kershaw, all these other guys. Then you can move some of those guys if you need to. But obviously, if you're the Dodgers at the same time, you're like, then why would we trade prospects? We probably like our prospects better than anything that we would get for Lance Lynn a year from 6 months from now. So, that's one thing to keep an eye on. And like as far as it's not like the Dodgers are going to move major league players right now to make this trade. This would definitely be a trade to win now. So we were talking about prospects. And so maybe you look at some of the positions the Dodgers are deeper in. But again, like you said, would you trade Keibert Ruiz for Lance Lynn? That feels like the cost is pretty high. And yet I just think the demand might be there for a guy like Lance Lynn that I'm not sure you can get him for less than that. Now, maybe you package some some lower level prospects and you get quantity over quality, and maybe they could Texas would bite on that, but I'm not really sure of what the upside is there.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's going to be a heavy market for a guy like Lance Lynn. We talk about how the Dodgers have a need for starting pitching.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other teams with far bigger needs for starting pitching than the Dodgers. When you look at, the Braves, the Yankees could certainly use a starter right now. So there's plenty of other teams that are going to be in the market, and I don't know if Andrew Friedman's going to get in the business of overpaying for a guy who's been good. We just mentioned all the stats and how great he's been, but at the same time, he's 35, 36 years old.
Yeah.
So, I don't see them overpaying for a guy like that. If he falls into your lap, awesome. That could be a solid addition for the postseason. You plug him in that rotation, but I don't think it's worth overpaying for.
Yeah, it is. There's lots of teams that would love to have a guy on a 2-year deal. I don't think the Dodgers fall into that category, only because they have a guy like David Price coming back next year. So,
exactly.
Well, the other big storyline, I think, from the second game is that Gavin Lux gets added to the roster. You get to add one extra guy to the roster on a day of a doubleheader. And I think you might have tweeted this out, that while Mitch White came in to take Walker Buehler's spot, there's speculation that maybe Mitch White is the one that's sent down and Gavin Lux retains his spot on the roster. So what did you make of Lux's performance today, and what do you think this means for him going forward? I wasn't surprised to see him starting. It feels like if he's going to be there, he should be starting, especially with some of the struggles with the other guys. But what do you think this means for him moving forward?
Yeah. I think if he's going to be up, then he's going to be starting. I feel like the organization has made that clear, just because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just have him sitting on the bench at his age and the developing he needs to do.
Yeah.
Nothing special out of him today. I think he went 0 for 3. He looked solid in the field, which is definitely a positive. And then after the game, Dave Roberts said that he is going to be returning to the taxi squad. So this was just a one-game thing for now. But I'm reading the tweets now, and Dave Roberts said, we'll see what we're going to do with Gavin over the weekend. So very vague. He might be back up. He might not be. He's traveling with the team, so he could come up at any time if they want. But yeah, I'm still kind of, unsure of what their plan is for him. I don't know if they still envision him as being the starting second baseman in the postseason, or if, his rough start to summer camp, if he kind of, went down a notch in their book, at least for this season. I know they're still high on him long term, but, right now we're kind of focused on this season and what he could, bring to this team as far as winning a championship this year. So I'll be curious to see, what they're going to do in the next few days. I think if you do envision him as, a starter in the postseason, or at least a guy who's going to see a lot of time, I would think you'd want to get him up here as soon as possible so he could get, a full month of experience.
Yeah, and it partly probably comes down to what you do with a guy like Kike Hernandez. 0 for 5 today, 3 strikeouts. We've talked about how much he has struggled, and it feels like at some point you have to make a decision of what direction you're going to go. Has Kike Hernandez gotten his shot? Has it been a fair shot? And is it Gavin Lux's turn to get 15, 20 games to see what he can get going? Obviously, Chris Taylor's in that mix. A guy like Edwin Rios, I believe, is on the verge of being activated again as well. And so there's lots of moving pieces here. But to me, that's the part. I mean, Kike was playing center field, but they're obviously, if Jock starts hitting, they're not short on outfielders. And, so it feels like they want to get Kike going, and it just isn't working. Now, we said the same thing about Austin Barnes, hero of the first game with an RBI double. We got to give our guy Austin Barnes a shout out for all the junk we talked about him in the beginning of the season. But to me, it's just I don't get the Kike thing, because as we've talked about, he hasn't done it. Even a guy like Austin Barnes, you could go back 3 seasons and say his on-base percentage was over 400 for like an extended period of time. Like, Kike Hernandez has never put it together. There's always glimpses of it, and there's moments, and you see the power, and you like the power, but it feels like Gavin Lux and Kike Hernandez, those two storylines are tied together in my book.
Yeah, I'm not sure I get the Kike thing either, to be honest. Like you said, he shows glimpses. I mean, we know how great of a fielder he could be. He plays all positions. We know he's got tremendous power. But he just hasn't been able to, put it all together. Like you said, another 0 for 5 day today. He's been, for a majority of the season, I'd say he struggled at the plate. Mm-hmm. But yet he still seems to be in that lineup just about every day. So I don't think you want to go into the postseason with a hole in your lineup when you could potentially have a guy in there who's, another threat with the bat. Even considering how dangerous this lineup is, you want your best guys in there. So, I definitely think the Lux Kike thing, Chris Taylor as well, that'll be a storyline to keep an eye on moving forward, because, I mean, pretty much every other starting position is set in stone. So it's just really that second base job.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm looking ahead to the schedule the next couple of days. The Dodgers travel to Texas. Interestingly enough, they get to face Lance Lynn on Saturday. So if you're curious about what Lance Lynn looks like, you could imagine him putting up a dominant performance against the Dodgers, and by Sunday morning, maybe he's on the roster. I know the trade deadline is Monday, so we'll see what happens. But then again, if maybe the Dodgers can rough him up, drop that cost a little bit, and see what happens. But I mean, we've got comments. Walter's commenting, we don't need to make any trades. We're fine. Leave it alone. I mean, I think that's the general consensus. The Dodgers are not desperate to do anything. Typically, they make moves around the edges, but it's like there's not really even room to make moves around the edges at this point. The bullpen is so deep with guys that they don't even have enough room for all of them. And even from a starting pitching perspective, they could trade for a guy like Lance Lynn, but then that might help you right now, but then it's like, okay, well, then Buehler comes back, and you've got Buehler, Kershaw, May, and Lynn. and then Gonsolin and Stripling and Wood, and like it just goes on down the list. So I definitely don't think the Dodgers are going to overreact. I think it's the beauty of being a Dodger fan that this front office has done nothing but earn all of our trust and all of our respect with every decision they have made. Basically, their track record is unbelievably successful, and so that's the beauty. I mean, I remember the days when it was like you wanted the Dodgers to make a trade, and yet you didn't trust them to make a good trade. Those days are long gone, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty. So I think both of us are skeptical anything happens between now and Monday. But I do think it's interesting that the Dodgers play against Lance Lynn, who is the one guy that there have been some rumors, how credible, who knows, but that is one guy that there seems to have been a tiny bit of smoke between the Dodgers and the Rangers. So that'll be something to keep an eye on this weekend as the Dodgers head to Texas. So with that said, as we look ahead, I mean, just looking ahead, what do you see for the series this weekend as they go to Texas?
Well, yeah, just real quick on the trade thing. Yeah, I just want to be clear that we're not, just because we're talking about potential acquisitions doesn't mean we're sitting here saying they need to make a move and they're not going to win the World Series if they don't make a move. Like, no, they're totally fine as is, and I definitely would not be shocked if they don't make any moves at all. So yeah, but as far as this weekend goes, I think Texas has been kind of scuffling recently. It'll be cool to see their new ballpark. It'll be the Dodgers' first series there. But other than Lance Lynn going on Saturday, I'm not sure the Rangers have a whole lot going for them.
Yeah.
I'll check our rotation real quick.
Does 1-9 in your last 10, does that qualify as scuffling, Daniel? They started the season started 10-10. They're now 11-19. They've lost 2 in a row. So that means they had lost 7 in a row leading up to winning a few days ago. But yeah, the Dodgers have we've got Dustin May versus Mike Minor tomorrow. We've got Stripling versus Lynn on Saturday. So probably a matchup that doesn't necessarily favor the Dodgers there. And then we've got Urias versus Gibson on Sunday. So an interesting weekend for the Dodger rotation. I mean, all 3 of those guys, May, Stripling, and Urias, are guys that have had positive moments and have had bottom moments. I mean, maybe Stripling hasn't really had any positive moments, but all 3 opportunities for them against the bottom-feeding team to hopefully get some things going, hopefully get some momentum going. Dustin May's been really good. I think it's been a little up and down, but overall, I mean, he doesn't belong in the same category as Urias and Stripling. Or I guess Stripling probably belongs in his own category. But it'll be a good test for the Dodgers. Can they come out of there with 2 or 3 wins on the road against a team like that?
Yeah, and I think with the trade deadline on Monday, this could be sort of an audition for these guys to see, if we really trust them to be in that postseason rotation or if we need to go out and get a guy. So I think it'll be a good test for them. Like you said, Texas is struggling. Mike Minor has not been good this year. Kyle Gibson is another guy who hasn't been very good. So that this should be a big weekend for the offense in that new ballpark.
Yeah, and another off day on Monday. So the bullpen, will be – you got so many arms down there and then an off day coming. So you can imagine that those guys will be geared up and ready to go. Maybe not tomorrow. I mean, a lot of those guys got used today. So maybe tomorrow, hopefully they can get some length out of Dustin May, maybe 6 innings. And hopefully it's a blowout and you get a guy like Dennis Santana to just come in for a couple innings and clean things up. But should be a good one. I mean, the Dodgers are 24-9, and they're going to play a team that's lost 9 out of their last 10. So expectations are high for the Dodgers, and we look forward to that. And so,
and let's see how many grand slams the Dodgers can hit. We just saw the Rangers give up 4 straight games of grand slams to the Padres. So now it's the Dodgers' turn.
Speaking of the freaking Padres, man, my buddy's a Mariners fan, and I was texting him. I mean, to have a 4-run lead with 2 outs in the 9th and to lose, unbelievable, unbelievable stuff for the Mariners. I mean, the Dodgers are 8-2 in the last 10. They haven't gained a single game over the Padres. Now they're 5 games up on the Padres, but still. One good bit of news for the Dodgers. The 2 losses for the Giants today moved them further into 4th. They're now 2 games out of 3rd place with the Rockies there at 16-15, which would make them clearly the best 3rd place team in the league as well. So good news there. We don't want to see the Giants in the postseason. We haven't even seen the Rockies yet, I don't think, have we? Oh, yeah, we did. We did last week. We finally got to see them. Yeah, exactly. So that'll be good coming up. So anyways, with all that said, we appreciate you joining us. It was a good day of Dodger baseball. We got 2 wins, 9-0, beat the Giants twice. I mean, it's just the best. It's a Thursday. We're looking forward to the weekend. There's nothing to complain about. Dodgers play the Rangers this weekend, so check those games out. Earlier starts. I believe it's 5:05 tomorrow, so keep an eye on that. But with that said, as always, check out DodgerBlue.com. Check out our YouTube channel. Later tonight, we'll have all sorts of good stuff, post-game interviews, and all sorts of highlights and recaps up on there. Check out the website for the latest on injuries, guys getting called up as the Dodgers decide what to do with Edwin Rios, with Mitchell White, with Gavin Lux. All that'll be on DodgerBlue.com. So we appreciate you watching. Enjoy the rest of your night, and go Dodgers.